everybody? It is so good to see all of you. And everybody that's joining via streaming, thank you also for being here. My name is Eitan Cantor. I'm the music director here at the Hebrew Educational Alliance. And on behalf of Moshe Kornfeld, the Chazan at Rodef Shalom, and Minyan Na'aleh, who was our third partner on this event, and all the staff of all those shuls, and everybody that's in the communities, thanks for being here. Wow. In this Selichot experience tonight, we're going to have three parts of the evening. The first is this Havdalah and concert vibe. Then we're going to have a class or teaching by Rabbi Shmuley, who's back here, and we're so happy that he's been teaching us all weekend and inspiring us to do good in the world. And then we have a Selichot service, which will be taking place in the sanctuary. We're just really excited to make music with you, and I'll turn it over to Moshe.
Just want to say also welcome and thank you. Selichot around the world is this amazing, magical night where people come together, often at a little bit later, usually at 12:30, 1 a.m., in the middle of the night, to just have this intense, wonderful beginning of the high holiday tefillah season. So we wanted to sort of bring some of that magic here to Denver. So that's why we brought everybody together. We also wanted to say that we have this song sheet, so please sing along with us if that's what moves you. If you just want to sing the melodies or sing the words or just sit and have the music wash over you, participate in whichever way you feel comfortable, and let's make some amazing music together. Thank you.
We can invite the rabbis to come help light the Havdalah candle and find some volunteers to hold the Havdalah things. It really does. So I didn't introduce Lily Gross before, but it is such a pleasure to have Lily singing. So thank you so much, and add so much. We have so many amazing musicians here. We'll introduce them all a little bit later. Okay, this one is a new one, never been performed live before. So let's do Havdalah. Oh, I totally forgot about the next song. Miriam Hanaviyah. Never mind, it's not that new. It's like maybe 6 months old.
Could be new to you. It's new though.
Miriam Hanaviyah,
Ozes Rabeada. Miriam Hanaviyah, Ozes Rabeada. Vimhera ve'yameinu itelienu el ha-Yeshua. Vimhera ve'yameinu itelienu el ha-Yeshua. Miriam tirkod itanu le'zimrat olam. Miriam tirkod itanu le'zimrat olam. Vimhera ve'yameinu itelienu el ha-Yeshua. Vimhera ve'yameinu itelienu el ha-Yeshua.
עוזו, אביה יננו, ויד יפעלה, אשר יגלה, אשירה עוזו, אביה יננו, ויד מפעלה.
Singing, although it was nice to have a couple people that apparently learned it from Spotify in the last 3 days. Awesome. But El Nora Alila by our friend Eliana Light is definitely a good one for some communal singing. So Zoe Moff over here on the bass, coming at us straight from Buenos Aires, is going to teach us the melody, and we'll learn the chorus together for El Nora Alila. Yes. El Nora Alila, El Nora Alila, Selanu Mechila, Sheata Neila, El Nora Alila, El Nora Alila, Selanu Mechila, Sheata Neila, El Nora Alila, El Nora Alila, Selanu Mechila, Sheata Neila, El Nora Alila, El Nora Alila, Selanu Mechila, Sheata Neila, Tei Misar Kerubim, Havanotim Rabban, Usalim Mechila, Sheata Neila, El Nora Alila, El Nora Alila, Selanu Mechila, Sheata Neila, El Nora Alila, El Nora Alila, Selanu Mechila, Sheata Neila, Shokim Lekana, Sham Bechei Basham Becham, Benziyeh Mechila, Sheata Neila, El Nora אליהו וגבריאל, בסונה גאולה, בשעת לילה, נורא תפילה, נורא תפילה, שלנו תפילה, בשעת לילה, נורא תפילה, שלנו תפילה, Okay, we're playing a lot of our favorite spiritual composers. We played some Deborah Sachs Mintz before, some Noam Katz. We played some Yosef Goldman. That was Eliana Light. And here we're going to play a couple by Joey Weisenberg, who I think is, if you don't know his music, he's putting out some really heartful things in the world. Here's Le'ela.
יתברך וישתבח, יתברך וידומם ויתנשא, יתהדר ויתעלה, ויתנשא וידקות שווה.
just give a shout out over there to Andre, who's keeping us marching, keeping us together, and just it's so beautiful. Got another Joey Weisenberg one coming up here. Ya Ale. Buddy, good thing we're not fasting already. Selichot, which is really the thing that started this whole event. Because I think we were kind of talking about Selichot, thinking about like Sephardic Selichot, which is really, it's not my culture. I don't think it's so much of Moshe's ethnic background either. But there's this beautiful tradition of Sephardic people getting up super early every morning during the month Elul and singing these responsive Selichot. And between that memory, or seeing YouTube videos of that and wanting to feel some of that energy, and also these experiences we've had in the East Coast with these like completely songful, just kind of ecstatic Selichot experiences, and the fact that we happen to have similar music tastes. We're like, okay, let's get together, let's do something. So I feel really grateful to everybody in the communities that were willing to come together. Okay. What does a G sound like, Dora? Last thing I need is all the words. So many. Adonai Selichot bochen levavot golei amukot tover tzedakot chazanu lefanecha rachem aleinu chazanu lefanecha rachem aleinu hey hadu benivlao hey vatim benechamot hey zocher bevitavot zocher bgerayot chazanu lefanecha rachem aleinu chazanu lefanecha rachem aleinu malei zehuyot norat tehilot solei amonot oneh be'etzaron chazanu lefanecha rachem aleinu chazanu lefanecha
Just you on the first verse. Just you on the first verse. Let's hear it.
Just a second, I'm going to call up Rabbi Grunwald. We're going to also do some transition over here. So we're going to sing a little bit of the nigun that we were singing last night while we transition.
Let's hear it again. Let's really applaud. Come on. That was amazing. Oh my God, what amazing voices and musicians up here. I'm jealous of musicians and people who can make music like this tonight. And how cute was it to see Moshe and Eitan together? I mean, really, they're adorable together. I hate to use that kind of language, but and it's so great to have our communities together. We've got lots of folks from Rodef here tonight. Rodef Shalom. Let's hear it for Rodef Shalom. And Minyan Na'ale. And many of us here at HEA. Many of you were here throughout the weekend. We've been here throughout the weekend with our scholar-in-residence, Rabbi Shmuley Yanklowitz. And it has been a pleasure to learn together from this very powerful, charismatic voice that reminds us that the basis of social justice, the basis of a more just world, is when people come together to encounter one another, when communities come together, and people join their voices together in song and in commitments to a better world, a world that is more just and kind and peaceful. And Rabbi Shmuley speaks with this prophetic voice, calling on us to join together with other people, to join together in our own communities and come together with other communities, to seek a world where we press on that arc of the moral universe and bend it a little closer to justice, right? So it has just been wonderful, Rabbi Shmuley, to have you with us this weekend. I could tell you about his biography, but I think I would just embarrass him. And you can even watch a documentary about Rabbi Shmuley on PBS about his journey into the rabbinate. No kidding, you can even find that online. So, and he is the director and educator at Valley Beit Midrash, which is currently based in Arizona and branching out into Denver. We have a wonderful partnership that includes Rodef Shalom, HEA, and several other organizations in town coming together around adult Jewish learning and really the work that Rabbi Shmuley and his organization, Valley Beit Midrash, does. So I think in the months ahead, keep an eye out for increasing offerings and partnership between all of our organizations to bring meaningful and inspiring Jewish learning to our community. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rabbi Shmuley.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And I didn't know anyone had seen this documentary. I'm actually glad my wife is not here tonight. She hates that documentary because people come up to her sometimes. They say, "Oh, I saw you in that documentary." And that was actually my girlfriend in rabbinical school, not her. And so I wish my wife was here because I miss her, but I'm glad she's not here to hear about this documentary because it's a sore spot. It's a sore spot in our relationship, this documentary. So it is so great to be with Rabbi Grunwald and Rabbi Schulman and Rabbi Kobrin and to hear Eitan and Moshe and thank you again to Laura and to Shira and to Morty and all the great team and to have these communities come together tonight. It's very exciting and there's many rabbis in the room who are friends and new friends and great to see you all and to see Ethan Widoff, if you'll give a little wave. Director of Valley Beit Midrash Denver, and Dr. Gary Friedlander, board member. Great to see you, and Tricia. And I'm so thrilled because the real heroes in the room, those people all are great, but the real heroes are you all. Because the rabbis were like, come at midnight for 10 hours, right, to this experience. And you all showed up, right before the high holidays. It's really amazing. Reminds me of that joke that there's this mother who's always on her son's case. To go to shul. You gotta go to shul, you gotta go to shul. He's always saying, I don't wanna go. You gotta go to shul. I don't really like them and they don't really like me. Why should I go? Give me one good reason. She says, I'll give you two. Number one, you're 57 years old. Number two, you're the rabbi of the synagogue. Right? So in fact, sometimes it's hard for everyone to show up, right? But you all showed up, and that's really amazing as we lead into Rosh Hashanah and to Selichot, a time of forgiveness, of forgiving ourselves and forgiving each other. A rabbinic colleague just shared a story with me I thought was really powerful. He was dancing at a wedding, and a young man came up to him. He said, Rabbi, you saved my life. So we're talking about it. You were just in my class, but it's nice to see you, but I don't really do very much. He said, no, you don't understand. Do you remember the case where there was a stolen watch in the class? The stolen watch. Yeah, I remember the case. And you said, when there was a stolen watch, that everyone should basically line up. And I thought that was the end. And everyone lined up, and then you said everyone to close their eyes. And to walk past, and when we walked past with the watch, to put the watch into your hand. And everyone lined up, and they did that. And it was amazing what you did that day. And he said, great, but what did I do for you? He said, well, obviously, Rabbi, I was the one who gave you the watch. And he said, I had no idea. He said, what do you mean you didn't know? You're the one who did the activity. He said, my eyes were closed too. And I think of that story, the power and the grace of being more gentle with each other, saving face, offering the potential for healing and for growth. And tonight our conversation is about the power of choice, what we've been talking about on Shabbat, if we've been together already, the power of choice. The Rambam, the Maimonides famously says that we should view the world as if there's a scale. And our very next action will tilt the scale either towards the redemption of the world or the destruction of the world. And few of us think that our choices have this much power, but the thought experiment he gives us is to see how little actions matter tremendously, how every moment matters. If someone came up to you and they said, I'm going to give you $86,400 every day for the rest of your life. Oh, where do I sign up? Amazing deal. Right? Here's the one condition. You have to spend all that money by the end of the day. There's no bank account to save the money in. You say, wow, I'm done with this rabbi gig. I'm in. Right? And he said, in fact, we've been given that gift, 86,400 seconds every day. And there is no account to save that time. The precious moments we have to choose to build up or destroy, to raise up ultimately with kindness or to lower others down. And yet, sadly, the best three cases against free will were made by Jews. And they were very good cases. Freud said we're determined by our early childhood experiences. Marx said we're determined by our socioeconomic status. And Spinoza said that we're determined by our inner disposition, what we call today our genes, our DNA. Right? Einstein even further with regards to the laws of physics. And of course, they're all right. They're all right. Marx was right. So our socioeconomic status is incredibly predictive of our future life. Freud was right. Our early childhood experiences are very indicative of where we're ultimately going to end up. And perhaps most of all, Spinoza, before anyone even knew about this, the power of our inner disposition, how much that controls our future destiny. And then comes Judaism and says, but you are free. But you are still free to make your choices. And the radical idea that we're going to come together on Selichot and Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur and dream of living new lives, that we're going to reinvent ourselves, we're going to tweak ourselves, refine our characters, elevate ourselves, that we are such dreamers in the world, that we can engage in such a spiritual activity. So I share this story with you. Two men, both seriously ill, occupied the same hospital room. One man was allowed to sit up in his bed for an hour each afternoon to help to drain the fluid from his lungs. His bed was next to the room's only window. The other man had to spend all of his time on his back. The men talked for hours on end. They spoke of their wives and families, their homes, their jobs, their involvement in military service where they had been on vacation. Every afternoon when the man in the bed by the window could sit up, he would pass the time by describing to his roommate all the things he could see outside the window. The man in the other bed began to live for those 1 hour periods where his world would be broadened and enlivened by all the activity he could see in the world outside. The window overlooked a park with a lovely lake. Ducks and swans played on the water while children sailed their model boats. Young lovers walked arm in arm amidst flowers of every color, and a fine view of the city skyline could be seen in the distance. As the man by the window described all of this in exquisite detail, the man on the other side of the room would close his eyes and imagine the picturesque scene. One warm afternoon, the man by the window described a parade passing by. Although the other man couldn't hear the band, he could see it. In his mind's eye, as the gentleman by the window portrayed it with descriptive words. Days and weeks passed. One morning, the day nurse arrived to bring water for their baths, only to find the lifeless body of the man by the window, who had died peacefully in his sleep. She was saddened and she called the hospital attendants to take away the body. As soon as it seemed appropriate, the other man asked if he could have his bed moved next to the window. The nurse was happy to make the switch, and after making sure he was comfortable, she left him alone. Slowly, painfully, he propped himself up on one elbow to take his first look at the real world outside. He strained to slowly turn to look out the window beside the bed. It faced a blank wall. The man asked the nurse what could possibly have compelled the deceased roommate who had described such wonderful things outside this window. The nurse responded that the man was blind and could not even see the wall. She said, perhaps he just wanted to encourage you. And friends, if we close our eyes in the world, we look out at the windows of reality, and yet we construct the reality. We control the narratives of what we tell of what's happening outside that window, that we can learn to dream again of what we are seeing and how we explain to others what we are seeing. Elie Wiesel loved to tell that Theodor Herzl and Sigmund Freud lived in the same district of Vienna, but how great it was they never met. Why was it great they never met? Because Herzl would have said, Im tirzu ein zu agada. If you will it, it is no dream. And Freud would have said, oh, you got a dream? Come lay on my bed. I will cure you. Come on this couch, I will cure you of your dream. In fact, that's what the world is trying to do to us. You are not free. You are not able to dream, right? You are determined, right? Change is impossible. And in fact, we can break from that conformity. We can break from that and ultimately make choices that can be transformative for us and for others. And as we engage HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Selichot tonight, I remind us that God, I believe, is the force that moves us from reality to the possible. From the Yud and Hey and Vav and Hey, the last three letters, Hoveh, mean present, the present. But the first letter makes it future, moving us from present to future. Eheyeh asher eheyeh. God says to Moshe, tell them Eheyeh sent you. Meaning, tell them everything is possible of who we can ultimately be in the world. The Baal Shem Tov famously taught, let me fall if I must, the one that I will become will catch me. And so I give you that bracha, and I hope you give it back to me, that the people we become tonight and this season can catch us as we make that scary leap. Okay, friends, there's 3 mitzvot to light candles. What's the most important one? Shabbat candles. And what's the reason for lighting Shabbat candles traditionally? Shalom bayit. Peace in the home, looking inwards. And if I asked a Gentile on the street, I said, when do Jews light candles? What would they say? Hanukkah! Of course, because it must be our most important holiday, because it overlaps with Christmas and holiday season and buying things. It's a great holiday, certainly not our most important traditionally. And what's the reason for lighting the menorah? Pirsume Nisa, right? Publicizing the miracle outwards. And it used to be that we put the Chanukiot out publicly to promote it publicly. Then persecution came, so we put the little rinky-dink thing on the, on the inside of the room. Actually, I've got a colleague, a rabbinic colleague. He's got a lot of shtick over in D.C. He puts his huge menorah on top of his minivan every year. Drives down the road. So there was a robber on his street one night, not a super clever robber. And there were two cars he could have stolen. He could have either chosen the 1989 black Nissan Altima or the minivan with the menorah on top. So he robbed my friend's car and he calls the police. He says, what does the car look like? He says, there's a big menorah on top. They find it 5 minutes down the highway, right? But it used to be that we want to publicize the miracle, right? And then what's the third mitzvah of lighting candles? Tonight, right? No, yeah, yard site is a beautiful minhag, beautiful custom, but what we did tonight with the Havdalah candles. Shabbat candles, looking inwards to the home, Shalom Bayit. Hanukkah, right? Hanukkah candles, looking outwards, publicizing the miracle outwards. The Havdalah candle, bringing the two together, the intertwined wick of our private lives and our public lives, of our inner lives and our outer lives. And that is our theme tonight of what we are looking at, of how do we intertwine our night of Selichot, our season of Teshuvah, with the kind of communities we're building, the kind of society that can be more just, a world that is built on kindness and love. And so what I want to do, briefly, is to get a little bit into the uncomfortable zone, to do a little spiritual chavruta, a little bit of relational learning, to find someone next to you you don't know for about 3 minutes, and basically share the deepest part of your soul with a stranger. I want you to share in 3 minutes with a stranger, not where you're from, which synagogue you're to, that's all great. I want you to share, right, something you're thinking about wanting to grow or improve in your inner life that is connected to something you're trying to do in your outer life. Something you're trying to do in your community or out in society, and how your work of teshuvah in your inner life is going to fuel that. Are you up for that? Okay, 3 minutes with someone next to you. Please go ahead. Timer starting. Okay, we can hand out sources now. If we have sources. One more minute, take 1 more minute. All right, take 10 more seconds. Okay, friends, we're going to bring it back together. We're going to bring it back together, friends. Okay. I wish we could go around and hear everything you all just shared. Hopefully you just gained a new chavruta, a new spiritual chavruta that you can share this stuff with going forward. And so our theme tonight is that the pathway towards changing the world is through ourselves. Rabbi Yisrael Salanter famously said, I tried to change the world and I realized I couldn't, so I tried to change my community and I realized I couldn't, so I tried to change my family and realized I couldn't, so now I try to change myself. And that's a complicated teaching, but the idea that it starts with us, as Gandhi famously said, be the change you want to see in the world. And one of the stories about his life that reflects that is, there was a mother who came to him and said, Gandhi, please, and she said, Gandhi, or she said, whatever you say when you say, talk to Gandhi, you know, tell my son to stop eating sugar. And he looks at the boy, he says, come back in 3 weeks. Comes back in 3 weeks, please, Gandhi, you're the only one he's gonna listen to. Tell him to stop eating sugar. And she's, come back in 3 more weeks. She goes, please, Gandhi, he's eating sugar all the time. You gotta tell him to stop eating sugar. He looks at the boy, he says, don't eat sugar. The mother says, it's amazing, but what took so long? He said, I had to stop eating sugar first. Right? He couldn't tell the boy to not eat sugar until he himself had stopped. And that's what to do. And the Baal Shem Tov says that the things that bother us most in the world are a mirror to our souls. Right? That the things that bother us are telling us of our own avodah, our own work, our own spiritual curriculum. So if we see injustice, if we see corruption on the news, we got to protest the corruption. But then we got to ask ourselves, where am I not living to my highest integrity? When we see narcissism on the news, or someone who's lying, right, we have to protest that. But then we got to ask ourselves, where am I myself not living, right, to the highest level of truth and to those very values that I'm teaching? And so those things that bother us are actually giving us our own inner work as well. So if you look at your source sheet here, we're going to start with Reb Simcha Banim. He said, the sages said, seek peace in your place and pursue it in another place. Everyone have one, or someone next to you? Yep, good, thank you. Okay, raise your hand if you don't, maybe someone will help. Oh, okay, a few. Okay, I don't know if we have more or we can pass a few more. Good. All right, good, yes. Love it, love it. You know, the other version of that Gandhi story is, all the rabbis in the room know one of our most common question is, Rabbi, how do I get my kid to love Judaism, right? Or my grandkid, how do I get them? And my answer is always, you gotta love it. You gotta love it. If you don't love it, right? And so it starts with us. The things we want for our kids, for the world, starts with us. So Reb Simcha Banim, the sages said, seek peace in your place. But pursue it in another place. You cannot seek peace anywhere but within yourself until you find it there. In Psalms it is said, there is no peace in my bones because of my sin. Only if we find peace inside ourselves can we seek it throughout the world. A very important teaching. Rak imatza adam et hashalom b'toch ha'atzmo, harehu yachol levat sho b'cho ha'olam kulo. Only if you find that peace within ourselves can we find. Now, Rav Kook famously taught, it says in the Talmud, Talmidei Chachamim marbim shalom be'olam. Sages increase peace in the world. He says, they do? You must be reading a different book. What do sages increase? Machlokit, disagreements. They argue all the time. They don't increase peace. That's the point. The most lasting form of peace is built on a foundation of respectful argumentation. Right? When couples come to me and say, will you marry me? Well, not marry me, but will you perform my wedding? Right? I say, tell me how you argue. They say, Rabbi, we have a great relationship. We don't fight at all. I say, I can't marry you. I can't imagine how much is below the surface you're not talking about. Right? I want to know you fight, but you fight respectfully and with dignity, right? And there's integrity to that. So Rav Kook says the same thing, that the type of peace we need is a peace of conflict. He's Hegelian, so he wants a thesis in battle with an antithesis to emerge with a greater ultimate synthesis. And that's what we're trying to do in Teshuvah as well, to kind of destroy a past self, but then realize we don't have to destroy that past self. We have to hold it and bring it close to become ultimately a new self. So Rebbe Nachman, the great-grandson of the Baal Shem Tov, who we just mentioned, he says, Ve'ahavta l'reacha kamocha, you shall love your fellow as yourself. Don't read reyecha as your fellow. Read it as your ra, as your evil. You shall love your evil as part of yourself. Because who are the scariest people in society? The people who can't see their shadow at all. They actually think they have it all worked out, right? And somebody asked the Kutzker Rebbe, actually, let's bracket that story. I'm going to come back to that. But in any case, so Rabbi Nachman says that shadow side of ourselves is actually the part we have to come to love. We have to come to own our fullness, our virtues and our vices, right? Our traumas and our glories. And when we own that full self, and that's what we're holding ourselves in this season of Teshuvah, that is a way for us to ultimately channel that shadow side towards good. So our first midah, our first trait of the night is shalom. And realize if we're trying to foster peace in the world, we have to do the inner work as well. In prayer, in meditation, in therapy, in community. Our second one is courage, in Avot de Rabbi Natan. Ezehu Gibor, who is the greatest of heroes? Great question, and from Pirkei Avot. One who conquers one's own impulse. Right? Hakovesh et Yitro. That's a great answer already. Right? That's the answer in Pirkei Avot, for one, Ben Zoma. But then he goes on, or they go on, and others say, who is the greatest of heroes? One who makes an enemy into a friend. Mi she'oseh sonei ohavo. I mean, how radical is this that in ancient society, the hero was the alpha male who goes in the front to war, the one who could pull the sword out of the stone, right? The physically strongest, that's the hero. And over here, it's the one with inner restraint, a sense of self-control, one who can transform relationships, enemies into friends. And here's a Talmudic teaching which is really radical and really challenges me in ways that are not so comfortable. That it says, it's always about donkeys with the rabbis, and in the Torah it's always about donkeys. You see your friend with a donkey, the donkey's having trouble, you got to help them. If there's an enemy with a donkey, you still got to help, right? But then the Talmud gives a great moral dilemma. What if you see them both at once? I don't know if this was your dilemma today. Do you have this dilemma today? Right, there's two donkeys on the side of the road. So it says actually you got to help your enemy first with your donkey before your friend. Not an obvious choice, but they said in order to overcome this inclination. And so this courage to be authentically ourselves, to bring our unique gifts into the world. One of my favorite parts of the stories of David is that when he's preparing to go to war with Goliath, he goes to meet his future father-in-law, King Saul, and he says, hey, wear my armor. Wear my armor to fight Goliath. And so little David goes and puts on big King Saul's armor, and he walks around clunky, and he takes it off. And, I don't know about you, I love my father-in-law, but I don't want to wear his clothes. And neither did David. He took it off and he put on his humble shepherd's gear, and then he ultimately went to battle. The things that we fight for in the world, we have to wear our own clothes. There's courage to be our authentic selves. So that's our second midah to reflect on tonight. How am I going to bring my courage into the world this coming year? Then we move to chesed, the foundation of it all, right? The kindness, the opportunities every day to give an uplifting word, to give tzedakah, to help someone who is down. And it says here famously in the Talmud, Rabbi Simlai says, the Torah begins with Gimilut Chasadim and it ends with it. How does it begin? Right? Adam and Chava realize they're naked and God clothes them. How does it end with Chesed? That we don't bury Moshe, God buries Moses at the end of the Torah according to the rabbis. Now, I actually love that we don't know where Moshe is buried because, as I shared earlier, my son is named Meir Lev Cook, so he has the initials MLK. So I'm a big fan of MLK. But we have to ask ourselves, does Martin Luther King take up too much space in the civil rights discourse? Because when we go to Pesach, we go to the Seder, we're not talking about Moshe. Moshe's not in the Haggadah, right? We're not interested in Moshe. It's not about the man. It's about the collective redemption. Right? And when we make a heroic redemption experience about one primary person, we've in some ways distorted this ultimate experience of what the collective is doing here. And so that's why I would suggest we don't know where Moshe is buried. We need to not make it about this one person. But to open our hearts tonight in this season for the opportunities of chesed. I recently received a donation, and it was for $5. Said $5 if you're a Jew and you have some money, you don't really want to give, so you give 18. give 5. Then I said, it says in honor of my mother. I said, in honor of your mother? You must not have loved your mother very much. Oh, $5, to further Jewish learning in her memory. What are you going to, give a Dixie cup of water? I go down on the screen further, address, homeless. And I stared at this screen for like 20 minutes. I said, did I ever make a sacrifice as big as what this person just did? The $5 they gave up a pack of cigarettes, whatever that costs these days, or a lunch or 2 meals, whatever the case is, the type of sacrifice this person made to ultimately honor his mother. And that's a question for us. What am I willing to sacrifice of my comfort if I truly believe in the most noble virtues of our tradition, of pikuach nefesh, of saving lives, of tzedek tirov, to pursue justice in the world, the values what am I willing to ultimately give? Some of these big questions that we return to each year. There was a case in Texas just recently, you may have seen this, where there was a judge who had a veteran in his courtroom. And the veteran, sadly, like many vets, he had just come back from Afghanistan and had served very nobly. He was Purple-hearted. And like many, had come back with a bad case of PTSD. And like many with a bad case of PTSD, turned to the bottle. And like many, got a DUI. And so the judge said, I'm very sorry, I have to give you the bare minimum, which is 24 hours in jail. And so they handcuffed this vet and they walked him out of the courthouse and the judge followed. And they walked him down the road and the judge followed. And they walked him into the jailhouse and the judge continued to follow. And they walked him down the row and put him into his cell. And the judge walked into the cell with the vet and he closed the gate. And the vet said, Judge, what are you doing here in the cell? And the judge said, I had to, by the integrity of the law, give you the bare minimum of 24 hours. But if you're in here for 24 hours, then so am I. Thank you for serving our country. And that story really shook me of the idea of allyship, the idea of solidarity. Are we willing to lock ourselves in the cell, so to speak, with others who are in a very dark place, the invisible people whose cries are not heard, whose pain is not seen? And so then we move on here to humility on our second page, anivut, not to take up any more space than we should or any less space than we should, but to know our own dignity and take up the space we ought to take. And Rav Kook says it is only when a person is in a state of low-level spirituality that they will express a desire to glorify themselves before honoring others. Such a person will seek honor both through the virtues they possess and with other virtues they don't possess. He continues, when humility engenders sadness, it is flawed. When it is genuine, it contributes to joy, to courage, and to inner dignity. One of the stories I love about his own leadership was that one of his detractors, we should all be blessed to have detractors, because we're actually doing something, and so that's agitating a little bit in different ways. And one of his detractors would pour garbage on his head when he'd walk in the streets of Jerusalem. Not like a few crackers, like a Slurpee. I don't know if they have Slurpees in the 1930s, but like a Slurpee, something that's really gooey on your head, right? And so it turns out that this detractor got very sick. And he needed a medical procedure that only one person in the world knew at that time, someone in London. And it turned out the only person in Eretz Yisrael who had any relationship with this doctor was Rav Kook, the one he'd been pouring the garbage on his head. And so the tzaddik of Yerushalayim, Rabbi Aryeh Levin, he was called the tzaddik because he spent his time in senior residences, people with dementia, and when he wasn't doing that, in jail cells, visiting with people who were there for life sentences. He sat with people who were in their lowest states, and he came to Rav Kook and he said, please, we gotta help this guy, and not sure how he'd respond. And he immediately wrote a letter to the doctor asking for help. And then he called him back and he said he's gonna need money for his voyage, and he gave his money. He couldn't even see his detractor as his enemy, right? Because ultimately, when it's not about us, when we make the petty arguments we all have at work or at home or out, when we lower our narcissism and we lower our ability to be so hurt, and we are forgiving, we can ultimately heal our communities in some of the most powerful ways. And that requires the loosening of our grips on absolute truth. Let's go to our last sheet here. One of the greatest, we often say one of the greatest Israeli poets, and we say that because he's the only Israeli poet we've heard of, is Yehuda Amichai. So we should learn about more Israeli poets and call them great too. But Yehuda Amichai, translated here by Chana Black, Stephen Mitchell, he has this great poem, Min hamakom shebo anu tzodkim lo yitzmechu le'olam prachim be'aviv. From the place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. The place where we are right is hard and trampled like a yard, but doubts and loves dig up the world like a mole a plow, and a whisper will be heard in the place where the ruined house once stood. The place where we are right, flowers will never grow in the spring. And we live in a time period, as we've discussed this Shabbat, of a radical relativism where people aren't willing to fight for anything at times, and a radical fundamentalism where people have it absolutely right. And then we put a mezuzah on our front door. And interesting, about all the debates of the rabbis, usually one rabbi wins. Not so many negotiations or concessions. But here they gave in. They said, you want the mezuzah horizontal, you want the mezuzah vertical, we're going to make a concession. When you walk into the home, it's going to be on an angle. It's going to be on an angle. Because the home needs to be built on making concessions, on peace, not on absolute truth. The home cannot last. So every time we walk in and we kiss that mezuzah, we realize we have to loosen our grip on our absolute truth, that peace wins out over truth. Now, the last source, in the interest of time, I'm going to skip this last source because I know we've got to keep moving tonight on this issue of trust. This issue of learning once again to trust. Bill Gates, in his last blog post of 2021, said the greatest threat in America today is the inability to trust. Whether that has to do with trusting public health experts, we all know what I'm referring to there in regards to public health advice and protocol, whether it has to do with the ability to trust democracy and the democratic process, those who are unable to trust that, whether it has to do with the ability to trust the news, but the ability for us to come together with bitachon, the ability for us to, once again, trust one another. And the greatest crisis in America today is the breakdown of empathy. The University of Michigan just did a study. They said in the last 4 decades, the capacity for empathy has dropped 40%. 40%. That means if you're a man, it's harder to know what it's like to be a woman. If you're white, what it's like to be a person of color. If you're straight, what it's like to be queer. If your body has abilities, what it's like to have disabilities. If you're rich, what it's like to be poor. Right? If you're Christian, what it's like to be Jewish or Muslim or another religious minority. If you have citizenship, what it's like to be undocumented. It is harder and harder for people to understand what it's like to be anything other than themselves. And then we have a radical spiritual revolution to reawaken ourselves, to reimagine what it's like to be someone other than ourselves, which takes a lot of humility in dialogue and encounters in relationships to understand what it's like to be anyone other than myself. And that panim, the face of the other, as Buber and Levinas talk about, the panim is connected to bifnim, the interiority. The exteriority of the encounter of the face of another awakens our interiority, our inner lives. That when we encounter each other, we ultimately find ourselves. And that's selichot, of laying on the floor before a Kodesh Baruch Hu, putting our faces down, ultimately realizing we have been serving the idols of self-fulfillment at the expense and cost of all those. So I want to close with this one thought as we move into our slichot tonight, with great gratitude to everyone here tonight and your willingness to have your hearts open and engage in the messy work of realizing how we can all do better and hold each other more tightly as we work as Am Yisrael to fulfill our mission. The mission that Avraham was chosen. Why was Avraham chosen as the first Jew? La'asot tzedakah u'mishpat, to do justice in the world. That we are to be on the front lines of advocating for those who need us the most. And that work starts within ourselves. So how many of y'all have been on the tour bus in Jerusalem, headed to the old city down that big hill right there? Yeah, you raise your hand. If you haven't, I hope you will soon. If you're in your 20s, to go with Ethan to Israel next summer, talk to him about that, about how to join that trip. We're going down, and if you recall, that valley there is called, anyone recall what that valley is called? Gehenna, Gay Ben Chinom, right? Gehenna, which means hell, right? I mean, Ketef Chinom over there. And why do we call it that? Because that's what the archaeologists found, that the Canaanites would have child altars. They would kill children in the name of God. That's one of the reasons I love the story of the binding of Isaac. It's such a forward-looking story. Because the Akedah, the binding of Isaac, is where God says, whoa, the whole world is killing children in the name of God. I want to get you as close as possible to that moment and then intervene to say, never again will you kill a person in the name of God. Right? The fundamentalists are always going to tell you you're on the right side. Go kill in the name of my God, and never again should you do that. Right? I want to make that totally clear. So they found these altars, and they said, this must be hell. That in serving God, they're killing these children. But in 1979, the Israeli archaeologists dug a little deeper. They dug a little deeper and they found 2 silver amulets. And inside those 2 silver amulets has the oldest Torah we have today, roughly 7th century BCE, 600 years earlier than Dead Sea Scrolls. And what it says inside there is, Yevarecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ye'ernai panav elecha v'kunaka, Sanai panav elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. The most ancient Jewish prayer for peace. That, friends, if we go into the darkest places in the universe where they kill kids in the name of God, and we dig a little bit deeper, we find the most ancient prayer for peace. We dig into the darkest places of evil, of pain, of trauma, and we go a little deeper, and there is a spring of light and of blessing pouring forth. I give you all the bracha, and I hope you'll give it back to me, that this season, we go into some of those dark places, some of that hard work, to once again dream of what the world looks out like outside the hospital room, when there's just a wall we can't fully see, to once again dream of what we can be in the world, individually, as your synagogue, as Am Yisrael, as humanity, what we can do, and together go into those dark places and never lose our hope and our faith that light is on the bottom ready to pour out. Shavuot Tov.
Yasher Koach, thank you so much for learning with us this weekend and for sharing your Torah with us. And we look forward to continuing to collaborate with Valley Beit Midrash. So tonight we're going to continue now into the sanctuary, correct? Oh yeah, go right ahead.
On our way to the sanctuary to really build off of some of the great learning and introspection and thoughts that Rabbi Shmuley was just really laying out for us, and that I think landed for each of us differently. We have some rocks. You're probably wondering when you're walking through the sanctuary, why are there a bunch of rocks on tables and pens? Well, that is so that you can take a little piece of this home and that it can land for you beyond just tonight, but you can carry it with you through the high holidays and beyond. And Shira has done a beautiful job of getting pens that we can write on our rocks and take them home. So think as you're leaving this space and entering the space of the sanctuary or heading home if you're not able to stay with us, we invite you to take a moment to put a kavanah, an intention, on a rock, and then put it in your pocket, and then bring it out when you need to do some of that deep inner work in the weeks and months ahead. So you can find your rocks on the way out.
And then from here we'll go to I think in about, we have a time at 10 p.m. So a little bit of a break, and then at 10 p.m. we'll start the Selichot service in the sanctuary. Hey, I wanted to actually, I want to apologize that